It was 6:47 in the morning when I realized my daughter had erased me. I was standing in my kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes, cold coffee from the night before sitting next to the sink, when I opened my phone to check the time. That's all, just the time. But my thumb slipped, muscle memory taking me to my photos like it always does. And that's when the floor dropped out from under me. Empty. Every album, every folder, every single photograph of her, gone. 23 years of her life, deleted in one sitting. Her first steps, her high school graduation, that photo of us at the Grand Canyon where she's laughing so hard she's doubled over because I pronounced coyote wrong. All of it, erased. My hands started shaking before my brain could even catch up. I scrolled frantically, thinking maybe it was a glitch, maybe I'd opened the wrong app, maybe I was still asleep and this was just some cruel nightmare my subconscious had cooked up. But no, the albums were still there, family, birthdays, Emma, just hollow, like gravestones with nothing buried beneath them. And here's the thing that made my chest tighten so hard I had to sit down. This wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally delete hundreds of photos. You don't accidentally open someone's phone, go through their entire gallery, and methodically remove every trace of yourself. This was a choice, a message. And God help me, I still don't know what I did to deserve it. But maybe I do. See, Emma didn't just delete herself from my phone. She deleted herself from my life 3 months ago. No fight, no screaming match, no dramatic goodbye. She just stopped answering my calls, stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. And when I drove to her apartment to check on her, because that's what fathers do, right? We worry. She opened the door, looked at me like I was a stranger selling something she didn't want, and said 5 words I'll never forget. "You don't get to do this." I didn't know what this was. I still don't. But I left, and I haven't seen her since. Until yesterday, when I checked my phone records and saw the truth. She'd been in my apartment. 2 days ago, while I was at work, she used the spare key I gave her for emergencies and came into my home. She didn't take anything else, didn't leave a note, didn't break anything or leave some angry message scrawled on my bathroom mirror. She just deleted her photos and left. What kind of anger is that? What kind of pain drives someone to erase themselves so completely, so quietly? I keep thinking about the last real conversation we had. Not the awkward silences or the texts that went nowhere, but the last time we really talked. It was late April. We were sitting in my car outside her therapist's office, and she said something I didn't understand at the time. She said, "Dad, do you ever think about the version of me you loved versus the version of me that actually exists?" I laughed it off, told her she was overthinking things, told her I loved her exactly as she was. But sitting here now, staring at these empty albums, I wonder if she was trying to tell me something I was too stubborn or too scared to hear. Maybe the version of her I kept on my phone, frozen in birthdays and holidays and carefully framed moments, wasn't the daughter she needed me to see. Maybe I've been holding on to a ghost while the real Emma has been screaming for me to let her go. Or maybe I'm just a father who failed his daughter in ways I still can't admit to myself. Ways that are about to come to light whether I'm ready or not. Because here's what I haven't told you yet. Emma isn't the only one with secrets. I've spent 3 months trying to figure out what I did wrong, but the truth is, I know exactly what happened. I just didn't think she'd found out. I didn't think she'd ever have to know. And now that she does, I'm terrified that those deleted photos aren't just about erasing memories. They're about erasing me altogether. From her phone, from her life, from the story she tells herself about who her father really is.
If you've ever loved someone so much that losing them feels like losing yourself, if you've ever wondered if you're the hero or the villain in your own family story, if you've ever stared at an empty spot where someone used to be and asked yourself if you destroyed the thing you loved most, then you need to hear what comes next. Because this story doesn't end with deleted photos. It ends with a truth I've been running from, and I'm finally ready to stop running. Hit that like button if you've ever felt the weight of your own mistakes. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever been erased by someone you love? Or have you been the one doing the erasing? Subscribe to this channel because over the next 10 chapters, I'm going to tell you everything. The real reason Emma walked away, the secret I've been carrying, and the moment I might never get my daughter back. I'm done hiding. It's time you knew the truth. Let's do this together.
I started calling instead of texting, left voicemails that probably sounded more desperate than I wanted them to. Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Haven't seen you in a while. Let me know you're okay. Then, Emma, it's Dad again. Starting to worry here. Call me back. And finally, please, just talk to me. Whatever's going on, we can fix it. She never called back. I drove to her apartment on a Tuesday, told myself I was just being a concerned father. She answered the door in pajamas, even though it was 3 in the afternoon, her hair in a messy bun, her eyes red like she'd been crying or hadn't slept or both. She looked at me like I was trespassing, like I was the problem. "You don't get to do this," she said. Her voice was flat, empty, like she'd practiced saying it. "Do what?" I asked. "Check on my daughter?" "Show up uninvited? Act like everything's normal. Act like you care." The door closed before I could respond. The last real conversation we had happened in my car outside her therapist's office. I didn't even know she was in therapy until I saw the appointment reminder on her phone. She'd left it on my kitchen counter one of those last Sundays, back when she still came over, back when I still believed we were fine. Dr. Sarah Chen, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. The address was in one of those medical plazas near the university, the kind with a yoga studio on one side and a Starbucks on the other, where everyone looks like they're either finding themselves or running from themselves. I showed up unannounced, told myself I just wanted to take her to dinner after, surprise her, maybe break through whatever wall had been building between us. But really, I wanted to know what she was telling a stranger about our family, about me. She came out of the building at 4:47, saw me leaning against my car, and her whole body went rigid. For a second, I thought she might turn around and go back inside. But she didn't. She walked over, climbed into the passenger seat without a word, and stared straight ahead through the windshield. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to see you. We used to talk, remember? Before you decided I wasn't worth your time anymore?" She laughed, but it was the saddest sound I've ever heard. "Before I decided? That's really how you see this?" "Emma, I don't know what I did wrong. You have to help me understand." That's when she turned to look at me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Dad, do you ever think about the version of me you loved versus the version of me that actually exists?" I didn't understand the question. Still don't, not really. I told her I loved her exactly as she was, that she was overthinking things, that whatever she was dealing with, we could work through it together. The words felt right coming out of my mouth, but wrong landing in the space between us. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You know what Dr. Chen asked me today? She asked me when I stopped believing you could see me. Not the daughter you wanted, not the daughter you remember. Just me, as I am right now." "I see you," I said. "I've always seen you." "No, Dad, you see a version of me that doesn't exist anymore, maybe never existed, and I'm so tired of trying to be her for you." She got out of the car without saying goodbye.
I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching people come and go from that building, wondering what secrets they were all carrying, what versions of themselves they were trying to reconcile. I thought about calling after her, demanding answers, making her explain what the hell she meant. But I didn't, because somewhere deep down, in a place I didn't want to look, I knew. Have you ever loved someone so much that you refused to see who they really were? Have you ever held on to a version of someone that only existed in your head, while the real person standing in front of you was screaming to be seen? I shouldn't have kept the spare key. Emma gave it to me 2 years ago when she first moved into that apartment, back when we were still good. In case of emergencies, she'd said, dropping it into my palm with a smile. I'd put it on my keychain next to my house key and my office key, and I'd never used it, not once. Not once. Until 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks after that conversation outside the therapist's office, 3 weeks of unanswered calls and texts that sat on delivered but never read, I told myself I just needed to check on her, make sure she was eating, sleeping, taking care of herself. That's what fathers do. We worry, we protect, even when we're not wanted. I went on a Thursday afternoon when I knew she'd be at work. Let myself in like I had permission, like I wasn't crossing a line I could never uncross. The apartment was exactly how I remembered it. White walls covered in her art prints, plants on every surface, that ridiculous vintage record player she'd bought at a flea market and never learned how to properly use. But something was different. The air felt heavier. Or maybe I just felt heavier being there uninvited. I don't know what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe? Some concrete thing I could point to and say, ah, that's why she's acting this way. That's the problem I can fix. Instead, I found myself wandering through her space like a detective in my own daughter's life, and the more I saw, the less I recognized. There were books I didn't know she read, heavy ones about identity and trauma and family systems. Therapy workbooks with pages of her handwriting, exercises about establishing boundaries with toxic relationships and recognizing patterns of emotional manipulation. Every page felt like an accusation I couldn't defend myself against. I found a journal on her nightstand. I told myself I wouldn't open it, told myself that was a boundary even I wouldn't cross. But I did. Of course I did. The first entry I saw was dated 4 months ago. I think I'm finally ready to accept that my father will never be who I need him to be. He'll always choose his version of reality over mine. He'll always make me the problem instead of looking at himself. My hands were shaking when I put the journal down. I wanted to be angry, wanted to tell myself she was wrong, that she was the one refusing to see clearly, that I'd been nothing but a good father who loved his daughter unconditionally. But the words in that journal didn't sound like anger. They sounded like grief. I checked her photos then, the ones on her wall, in frames scattered throughout the apartment. There were pictures of her with friends, pictures from trips I didn't know she'd taken, pictures of her at protests and pride marches and events I'd never been invited to. And in every single one, she looked happy, free, like a weight had been lifted. There were no pictures of me, not one. It was like I'd been edited out of her life long before she deleted those photos from my phone. I left her apartment that day knowing I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And I left knowing something else too. Whatever secret she'd discovered about me, whatever truth had finally made her cut me out completely, I'd been right to hide it. Because if this was how she reacted to just suspecting, how would she react to knowing for sure? I need to tell you something I should have told Emma years ago. Something I convinced myself didn't matter, that it was ancient history, that bringing it up would only cause unnecessary pain. I was wrong. But by the time I realized how wrong I was, it was too late. When Emma was 17, something happened. Something I chose not to see. It was the summer before her senior year of high school.
Karen and I had been divorced for 2 years by then, and Emma was spending the summer with me like she always did. She had this boyfriend, Marcus. Nice kid, polite, the kind of teenager who actually looked you in the eye when he shook your hand. I liked him. Emma didn't talk much that summer. I told myself it was normal teenage stuff, that she was just at that age where parents become embarrassing and irrelevant. She spent most of her time in her room, door closed, music playing too loud. When she did emerge, she was quiet in a way that felt different from normal quiet, heavy, like she was carrying something she didn't know how to put down. One night in late July, I came home from work early and found her sitting on the bathroom floor, crying so hard she could barely breathe. The kind of crying that sounds like drowning. I asked her what was wrong. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. A question, a test. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "if I told you something really bad, would you believe me?" I should have said yes immediately. Should have pulled her into my arms and told her that no matter what it was, I would listen, I would believe her, I would protect her. But I didn't, because in that moment, I was scared. Scared of what she might say. Scared of what it might mean. Scared of having to deal with something I didn't know how to fix. So instead, I said, "Emma, you're upset. Let's talk about this when you've calmed down, okay?" She stared at me for a long moment. Then she wiped her face, stood up, and said, "Never mind. I'm fine." She wasn't fine, but I let myself believe she was because it was easier than facing whatever truth she'd been about to tell me. 2 weeks later, she broke up with Marcus, wouldn't tell me why, wouldn't talk about it at all. By the time senior year started, she'd changed, became quieter, more withdrawn, more careful about everything she said and did around me. I told myself it was just growing up. Told myself that's what happens when kids become adults. They pull away, they keep secrets, they build lives we're not invited into.
I didn't know the full story until 6 months ago. Didn't know until I overheard her on the phone with her mother, her voice shaking with a pain I recognized from that night on the bathroom floor. Didn't know until I heard her say, "He didn't believe me then. Why would he believe me now?" Marcus had assaulted her, that summer, in my house, while I was at work. And when she'd tried to tell me, when she'd given me that one chance to be the father she needed, I'd told her to calm down. I'd dismissed her pain as teenage drama. I'd failed her in the most fundamental way a parent can fail their child. And when she realized I still didn't know, that I'd been living for 6 years in blissful ignorance while she carried that trauma alone, that's when she started pulling away. Because how do you trust a father who chose not to see you when you needed him most? When has someone tried to tell you their truth and you chose comfort over courage? When have you failed someone by refusing to see their pain because seeing it would require you to change? After I found out about Marcus, after I overheard that phone call and the floor dropped out from under my carefully constructed ignorance, I did what I always do. I tried to fix it. I tried to make it about me and my redemption instead of about Emma and her healing. I called her at midnight on a Tuesday. I'd been drinking, which I never do, but that night I needed something to dull the edges of what I'd learned. Needed something to make the shame feel less suffocating. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and when she did, her voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Dad, it's midnight. What's wrong?" "I know," I said. The words came tumbling out before I could stop them. "I know what happened with Marcus. I know what he did to you. And I'm so sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard her breathing, sharp, shallow, like she was trying not to cry, or maybe trying not to scream. "How do you know?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I overheard you talking to your mom a few months ago. I didn't mean to, You've known for months?" Now her voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was sharp, furious. "You've known for months and you're just now bringing it up? At midnight? When you're drunk?" "I didn't know how to." "Stop.
Just stop. I could hear her moving, could hear the rustle of sheets as she sat up in bed. You don't get to do this. You don't get to make this about your guilt and your apologies. You had your chance 6 years ago. You had your chance to believe me, to protect me, to be my father. And you chose yourself. You chose comfort over truth. You chose not seeing over dealing with something hard. I was scared, I admitted. I didn't know how to handle it. I was 17 and terrified, and you were my father. You think I wasn't scared? You think I didn't need someone to be brave for me when I couldn't be brave for myself? She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice, and it was the same sound she'd made that night on the bathroom floor. That drowning sound I'd refused to save her from. Emma, please, let me make this right. You can't make it right. That's what you don't understand. You can't go back and undo the fact that when I needed you most, you failed me. You can't go back and change the fact that I had to carry this alone for 6 years because you couldn't handle being uncomfortable for 5 minutes. I'm trying now. You're trying now because your guilt is uncomfortable, not because I need you, not because it's what I want. You're trying because you can't live with yourself, and you want me to absolve you so you can feel like a good father again. But I'm not here to make you feel better about failing me. The line went quiet again. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that I was calling because I loved her, because I wanted to help. But deep down, I knew she was right. This call wasn't about her healing. It was about my guilt, my shame, my desperate need to be forgiven for something unforgivable.
I want you to know something, Emma said finally, her voice steadier now. I've spent 6 years in therapy trying to understand why you didn't believe me, trying to figure out what I did wrong, how I communicated poorly, how I could have made you understand. And you know what I finally realized? It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about you choosing your comfort over my truth. And that's not something I can fix. That's not something I can make easier for you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there in my dark living room, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air and understanding with terrible clarity that I just made everything worse. I've replayed that night 1,000 times. The night Emma sat on the bathroom floor, drowning in tears, asking me if I would believe her. I've rewritten it in my head so many times that sometimes I forget which version is real and which version is the fantasy where I'm the father she deserved. In the fantasy version, I drop everything the moment I see her. I don't hesitate. I don't tell her to calm down or wait until she's feeling better to talk. I sit down on that cold tile floor next to her and I say, "Tell me everything. I'm listening. I believe you." In the fantasy version, when she tells me what Marcus did, I don't flinch. I don't make it about my discomfort or my shock or my inability to process that something like this could happen in my house, to my daughter. I hold her while she cries. I tell her it's not her fault. I tell her I'm proud of her for having the courage to tell me. I tell her we're going to deal with this together, that she doesn't have to carry it alone. In the fantasy version, I drive her to the hospital. I hold her hand while they do the rape kit. I sit in waiting rooms and fill out paperwork and make phone calls to lawyers and police officers. I do all the hard, uncomfortable, necessary things that protect her and honor her truth. I don't shy away. I don't make excuses. I don't prioritize Marcus's future or his family's reputation or the discomfort of scandal over my daughter's safety and dignity. In the fantasy version, I believe her immediately and completely because that's what love looks like. That's what protection looks like. That's what being a father is supposed to mean. But that's not what happened. What happened was this. I saw her crying on that bathroom floor, and I felt afraid. Afraid of what she might tell me. Afraid of what I'd have to do about it.
afraid of how messy and complicated and difficult everything would become if I opened that door. So I didn't. I told her to calm down. I told her we'd talk later. And when later never came, I convinced myself it meant she was fine, that it wasn't that serious, that I'd made the right call. What happened was this. I saw Marcus at the grocery store 3 months later. He was with his mom, looking at cereal boxes like he was just a normal kid living a normal life. And I walked right past him, didn't say a word, didn't confront him, didn't punch him in the face like I should have. Because doing any of those things would have required me to admit what I'd refused to see. What happened was this. Emma stopped trusting me. Slowly at first, then completely. She learned that when it mattered most, I would choose my comfort over her truth. She learned that I couldn't be trusted with hard things, with real things, with the parts of her life that required courage and discomfort to address. So she stopped bringing me those parts. She kept them locked away, shared them with therapists and friends, and eventually her mother, everyone but me. And I let her, because it was easier to believe we were okay than to face the truth that we were broken. Easier to pretend our Sunday dinners and small talk meant everything was fine than to acknowledge the chasm growing between us with every year I refused to say, "I'm sorry. I failed you. I should have believed you." I thought time would make it better. Thought if I just kept showing up, kept being present, kept loving her in all the small ways I knew how, eventually it would be enough. Eventually she'd forget about that night on the bathroom floor, forget about my cowardice, forget about the moment her father chose himself over her. But pain doesn't work that way. Betrayal doesn't work that way. And you can't love someone into forgetting that you failed them when they needed you most. You can only own it, admit it, and hope that honesty might build something new from the ruins of what you destroyed. I never did that. I never owned it. Never said the words out loud until that phone call 6 years too late, when I was drunk and desperate and still somehow making it about me. I didn't know she'd been in my apartment until I checked my phone records. The building has this security app that logs when your key code is used, and there it was, Emma's code, 2 days ago at 2:17 in the afternoon. She'd been here while I was at work, let herself in like she still belonged here, like she hadn't spent 3 months erasing me from her life. At first, I couldn't figure out why. Nothing was missing, nothing was broken. The apartment looked exactly the same as I'd left it that morning. Coffee mug in the sink, newspaper spread across the kitchen table, my jacket hanging on the back of the chair. It was like she'd been a ghost passing through, leaving no trace except that timestamp in my phone. Then I opened my photo gallery and saw the emptiness. Understood with brutal clarity that she'd come here for one specific reason: to delete herself from my phone the way I deleted her from my life 6 years ago. I tried to imagine it. Emma standing in my apartment, my phone in her hands, scrolling through years of photos. Did her hands shake the way mine had when I discovered what she'd done? Did she cry? Or was she calm, methodical, finally taking control of a narrative I'd written for too long? I wondered which photos she looked at before deleting them. Did she pause on the Grand Canyon picture? The one where she's laughing so hard at my mispronunciation that she's bent double? Did she remember that trip? How we'd driven 16 hours straight because I insisted we could make it without stopping at a hotel? How we'd gotten lost 3 times because I refused to use GPS? How we'd finally reached the rim at sunrise and she'd grabbed my hand and said, "Dad, this is perfect." Did she look at her high school graduation photo? The one where she's wearing that bright yellow dress and holding her diploma like a trophy? I'd been so proud that day. Stood in the crowd cheering so loud she'd rolled her eyes at me later, but she'd been smiling when she said, "You're embarrassing." I'd told her that was a father's job. She'd hugged me and said, "Good thing you're good at it." What had she thought looking at that photo now? Did she remember feeling loved? Or did she remember what came after? That summer,
That night on the bathroom floor, my refusal to see her. I thought about all the photos she must have deleted. Birthdays and holidays and random Tuesday afternoons. Evidence of a relationship that once felt unbreakable. Proof that there was a time when we were good, when we were real, when I was the father she ran to instead of the father she ran from. She'd erased all of it. And sitting there staring at my empty albums, I realized something that made my chest hurt. She had every right to. Because those photos weren't documenting reality. They were documenting the version of us I'd insisted on maintaining. The happy father and daughter, the unbroken bond, the fairy tale where nothing bad ever happened because I refused to acknowledge that it had. Those photos were lies. Beautiful, carefully curated lies that let me pretend I was a good father while Emma carried the weight of my failure alone. And by deleting them, she wasn't erasing our history. She was refusing to participate in my delusion anymore. She was saying, no more pretending, no more performing, no more letting you hide behind these frozen moments while ignoring all the moments in between. It was the most honest thing she could have done, and it destroyed me. I sat on my couch for hours that night, phone in my hands, scrolling through the empty albums over and over, like somehow the photos might reappear if I looked hard enough. But they were gone. Just like Emma. Just like the relationship I'd convinced myself we still had. And the worst part? I couldn't even be angry with her. Because this deletion, this erasure, this final act of removing herself from my narrative was the first truly honest communication we'd had in 6 years. She was showing me what I'd done to her. She was making me feel what she'd felt when I deleted her trauma, her truth, her pain from my awareness. When I chose not to see, she was forcing me to see nothing. When I erased her reality, she erased her presence from mine. It was justice. Painful, surgical, perfect justice. And I deserved every bit of it. I must have typed and deleted the text 100 times. My thumb hovering over the send button, my heart pounding like I was about to jump off a cliff, which, in a way, I was. It started simple. Emma, I know you deleted the photos. I understand why. Delete. Then, I'm sorry for everything. Please let me explain. Delete. Then, you were right about me, about all of it. Delete. Then, I failed you when you were 17, and I've been failing you ever since. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Delete. Each version felt wrong. Too defensive, or too pathetic, or too focused on my need for forgiveness instead of her need for acknowledgement. How do you apologize for choosing silence when someone needed you to speak? How do you say, I'm sorry for not believing your daughter when she tried to tell you she'd been assaulted? What words could possibly be enough? I thought about calling again, but remembered how the last call had gone. Remembered her voice, sharp with fury, rough with tears, telling me I didn't get to make this about my guilt. She's right. She's always been right. But knowing not didn't make it easier to know what to do. So I sat with my phone, writing and deleting, while the hours ticked by, and the sky outside my window went from dark to gray to light again. I wrote essays in that text box, confessions and apologies and admissions of every way I'd failed her. I wrote about that night on the bathroom floor. I wrote about seeing Marcus at the grocery store. I wrote about every moment I chose comfort over courage. Every time I looked away when I should have looked closer. But none of it felt right, because the truth was, I wasn't trying to write a text that would help Emma. I was trying to write a text that would help me. I was trying to find the magic combination of words that would make me feel less like the villain in my daughter's story and more like the father I'd always believed myself to be. Around 4 in the morning, exhausted and half crazy with insomnia, I wrote this. Emma, I know why you deleted the photos. You deleted them because they were lies. Evidence of a relationship that only existed in my head while you were living in the truth I refused to see. You deleted them because keeping them meant participating in my delusion, and you're done pretending. I understand, and I'm sorry. Not sorry that you did it. You had every right. Sorry that I gave you reason to. Sorry that I failed you. Sorry that I spent 6 years choosing my comfort over your healing. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know that I finally see what I couldn't see before. You were right about everything. My thumb hovered over send for 5 full minutes. I read it over and over, trying to find the selfishness hidden in the words, trying to determine if this was truly for her or still somehow for me. In the end, I couldn't tell. Maybe there's no such thing as a purely selfless apology when you're the one who caused the harm. Maybe every apology carries the weight of the apologizer's need for absolution, no matter how much they try to strip it away. I didn't send it. Instead, I saved it in my drafts and put my phone down. Because Emma didn't need another text from me. She didn't need my late-night confessions or my carefully crafted acknowledgments of guilt. She needed space. She needed time. She needed me to stop making my journey of realization into something she had to witness and validate. For 6 years, I'd made everything about me. My comfort, my denial, my inability to face hard truths. Even in recognizing my failures, I was still centering myself, still making my enlightenment into something she should care about, still asking her to do the emotional labor of receiving my apology. So I did the only thing I should have done from the beginning. Nothing. I let her have her silence. I let her have her distance. I let her have the space she'd been fighting for since that midnight phone call, since that day outside the therapist's office, since that moment on the bathroom floor when she'd asked if I would believe her, and I chose not to answer. The text sat in my drafts for 3 days, then a week, then 2 weeks. Every time I opened my phone, I saw it there, that unsent apology, that admission of guilt, that final attempt to make things right. And every time, I chose not to send it. It was the first time I'd chosen her needs over mine. The first time I'd let her have the final word. The first time I'd accepted that some things can't be fixed with words, no matter how true those words might be. Maybe that's what love looks like when you've broken it beyond repair. Not grand gestures or perfect apologies, just the quiet acceptance that you don't get to decide when or if you're forgiven. You don't get to force reconciliation on your timeline. You don't get to make someone engage with your growth just because you've finally done the work you should have done 6 years ago. It's been 4 months since Emma deleted those photos. 4 months since I discovered what she'd done and understood, finally, what I'd done to deserve it. 4 months of silence broken only by the noise in my own head. The constant replay of every failure, every moment I chose wrong, every time I looked away when I should have looked closer. I'm not going to tell you we reconciled. I'm not going to give you the Hollywood ending where the father learns his lesson and the daughter forgives him and they rebuild their relationship stronger than before. That's not how this story goes. Maybe it never will be. Emma hasn't called, hasn't texted, hasn't shown up at my door ready to talk things through. And I haven't reached out again because I finally understand that healing isn't something I get to demand or schedule or control. It's something she gets to do on her own timeline, in her own way, with or without me. The photos are still gone. I thought about trying to recover them. There are services that can retrieve deleted files, ways to pull back what's been erased. But I didn't, because Emma didn't delete those photos by accident. She deleted them with purpose, with intention, with the full weight of 6 years of pain behind every tap of her finger.
and recovering them would be just another way of refusing to honor her choice. Just another way of insisting my version of reality matters more than hers. So I live with the empty albums. I live with the blank spaces where her face used to be. I live with the constant reminder of everything I lost when I chose comfort over courage, when I prioritized my own ease over my daughter's truth. Some days are harder than others. I'll reach for my phone out of habit, muscle memory taking me to photos I know aren't there anymore. I'll see something that reminds me of her, a yellow dress in a store window, a father and daughter laughing at a coffee shop, someone mispronouncing a word in that specific way that used to make her double over with laughter. And the loss hits me like a physical thing, heavy, inescapable, deserved. I've started therapy. Dr. Patricia Morris, Thursdays at 3 p.m. It took me 3 months to make the appointment, another 2 weeks to actually show up. I spent the first session just crying, ugly, gasping sobs that embarrassed me until Dr. Morris handed me tissues and said, "This is where healing starts, with admitting what you've done and feeling the full weight of it." We talk about a lot of things in those sessions, about why I couldn't hear Emma that night on the bathroom floor, about the ways I prioritized my comfort over uncomfortable truths, about how I built an entire relationship on the foundation of denial, carefully curating moments and memories while ignoring all the spaces in between where real life, messy, painful, complicated real life, was actually happening. Dr. Morris asked me once what I thought Emma needed from me. I gave all the answers I'd been rehearsing in my head. An apology, acknowledgement of my failures, proof that I'd changed. She listened patiently, then said, "But what does Emma actually need? Not what would make you feel better, what would help her heal?" I didn't have an answer. Still don't. Not really. Maybe what Emma needs is exactly what she's taken. Distance, space, the freedom to exist without the weight of my guilt or my desperate need for redemption pressing down on her. Maybe the most loving thing I can do is let her go. Not forever necessarily, but for as long as she needs. For as long as it takes for her to heal in a way that has nothing to do with me. I think about that question she asked me in the car that day. Do you ever think about the version of me you loved versus the version of me that actually exists? I understand it now, in a way I couldn't then. I'd been in love with a daughter who lived only in my head. The little girl who needed me, who trusted me without question, who saw me as a hero. I'd refused to see the woman she'd become, complicated, wounded, strong enough to survive without me, brave enough to cut me out when I became toxic to her healing. I didn't rob her of that. I robbed her of being seen as she actually was. I robbed her of having a father who could hold space for her complexity, her pain, her truth. I gave her a father who needed her to be simple and uncomplicated and untouched by trauma, because that's what I could handle. That's all I could handle. If Emma is watching this, and I don't know if she is, I don't know if she'll ever see it or if it matters if she does, I want her to know something. I want her to know that I finally understand what I couldn't understand before, that she was right to delete those photos, right to delete me from her life, right to prioritize her healing over my comfort, right about everything. And I want her to know that if the day ever comes when she's ready to talk, not because I need forgiveness, not because I need to feel better about myself, but because she's healed enough to decide whether there's anything worth salvaging in what we once had, I'll be here. Not demanding, not pressuring, just here, ready to listen in the way I should have listened 6 years ago. But until then, I'm learning to live with the empty albums, learning to live with the consequences of my choices, learning to be the father she needed, even if it's too late for her to ever see it. That's what I know now. That sometimes love means accepting you lost your chance. That sometimes the best thing you can do for someone you've hurt is give them space to heal without you.
That sometimes the photos get deleted and they stay deleted, and you have to live with the empty space where they used to be. It's not the ending I wanted, but it might be the ending I deserve. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Thank you for listening to a father who failed his daughter admit the truth he should have admitted years ago. If you've ever been the person who wasn't believed, who wasn't seen, who had to erase someone from your life to protect your peace, I see you now, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. If you've ever been the person who failed someone you loved, who chose comfort over courage, who looked away when you should have looked closer, there's still time to do better. Maybe not with the person you hurt. Maybe that bridge is burned beyond repair. But with yourself, with the next person who needs you to be brave, with the next moment that asks you to choose truth over comfort. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Drop a comment sharing your own experience. Were you the one who was erased, or the one who did the erasing? What did you learn? How did you heal? And subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to keep telling these hard truths. The uncomfortable stories. The ones where we don't get the happy ending, but maybe, just maybe, we get the honest one. Thank you for being here with me, for listening, for understanding that sometimes the most important stories are the ones where we admit we were wrong. Let's keep doing this together.